and to those of you online. It's always nicer to see people in person and see people smiling. So good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. I feel very privileged always to be speaking to these forums and students and people of our future, essentially. And Minister Dawson spoke a lot about how we can improve policing, for example, but also other industries that we're very fortunate to have in the government. So apologies to those online. I just said a welcome, and I'm very privileged to speak to people like yourselves, data specialists, anyone in the data field, huge assets to so many different businesses and agencies, both government and non-government. You'll hear me talk today about data. I love data. I get very excited about data, and I'm sure people in the room will also share my excitement around how we can use data essentially to achieve really amazing actionable outcomes for our community. So today I'm going to talk to you about how police use data and the journey that we've been on and the journey we hope to be on and where we like to see ourselves in the future. I'm going to talk to you about how police in particular use data and hopefully give you a bit of insight around what we do and why we do it and how we can improve policing, and also just around how it does help us achieve operational outcomes for our community. And I'm going to try and maneuver a lot of things at the same time, and I will show you that I have amazing multitasking skill sets with the clicker and the microphone. No, the clicker's not working. How about if I do the keyboard? No. Okay, yep, I'll do the keyboard, the 1980s style. So our mission, very, very simple, and you'll see it hopefully online and in the room, to solve crime and locate vulnerable people faster using people, capability and data. People, capability and data are equally as important as each other. So we want to solve crime faster for the community, we want to look after our community, and we want to be able to rapidly respond to any incident that comes our way. Not only do we want to do that for today, but we want to do that now and in the future. So it's continuously evolving, and this is why we need experts like yourselves to help us improve that moving forward. So I put this picture up often, not only to police officers and analysts and our data specialists, but it's something that I like to put up just for people to understand why we need data in policing. So pre-2000, you went to a crime scene essentially, and there was probably little to minimal digital evidence or digital devices that you might seize. So you'll go into a house and you might seize one huge, did anyone remember the Apple IIe computers? That's what I learned in primary school, and there was a little typing thing called pause, and it will teach you how to touch type. So you might seize one big computer, one phone. If you're lucky and the house was really sophisticated, you might have a little security system that you could seize. Solving crime was probably luck of the draw. You might have been lucky to get a DNA hit at the scene, or in particular, probably back in the days, you had an eyewitness or someone saying it was that person because I saw them at that location and that time, and that was like a hit. Yes, we got them. So it's a little bit different now, because back in the days we probably relied more on humans. Now we're relying more on data, in particular digital data, because we have so many devices that we hold on us right now. So look at these images and see if you can find some commonalities with all these images, and we'll talk through them quickly. Can someone just give me a time, because I tend to waffle on and I'll forget what time I've got to finish. So look at these images and you'll see in the far left corner there's someone lost in the middle of nowhere. You'll see someone's potentially doing a drug deal, someone's breaking into someone's house. You've got someone on the far bottom. They look a bit vulnerable and sad and maybe putting themselves at a bit of risk. There's my favourite, some money laundering going on, a transaction, and then there's an assault on the far right corner. So that doesn't look pleasant. So if I ask you what's common across these images, in particular in a policing context, it's identifying a person, it's locating them, and identifying any associating factors that are going to allow us to connect to the dots, or essentially give us some operational context around what's going on and how we can respond. You need that operational context to be able to respond rapidly. And this is what the data helps us achieve in all of these different circumstances. So looking at things like time, date, and location, what kind of data can we get from all of these 6 incidences? And they're all different incidences, but the beauty of data and the beauty of analytics is it's transferable across multiple different crime types. So this is just a bit of insight around why the need for data with policing. This is a bit of a need for change type slide, and I'm quite specific here, saying identifying or locating a person in 10 years will not change unless we do something about it. So I spoke earlier about if we were to go to a warrant, for example, and we would seize minimal digital devices. It's very different now when we go to a warrant. We're seizing multiple phones, iPhones, iWatches, earrings, other particular devices which are encrypted a lot of the times, TVs, you name it. I mean, you'll all have, I guess, multiple devices which I probably don't even know about. But over the years, things have changed. And if I also look at COVID, so I'm originally from Melbourne. For those online, go Victoria, go Melbourne. WA is a beautiful place, but I do love WA, but my heart is always Victoria. But I experienced a very heavy lockdown in Melbourne, and Melbourne, as you all know, was the most locked down city in the world. A lot changed during COVID, and a lot still has changed since we've gone through the pandemic. But many businesses changed their ethos and really embraced a use of data and analytics over time. So whilst a lot of businesses failed, so many thrived and are still thriving as a result. So those who thrived over COVID invested in data and really smart analytics. So they didn't just recover, like I said, they thrived and they continued to thrive, and they really changed their marketing and business models through using data, trends, and analytics. So for example, and I was totally a victim of this, the retail sector. So the whole know your customer through data and analytics boosted their sales dramatically. The data knew the customer's interests, their preferences, their shopping habits, what time they were on. If you bought this, you're going to be interested in that. Like, they really ramped that up. So you became almost addicted to buying unnecessary things, which I'm still a victim of today. The data led, and this is really important, the data provided insights which led to actionable outcomes. And actionable outcomes for the retail sector is generally making profit, yeah? They want customers to be sucked in to buy more and more of their products and continue to buy things even when you don't need them. So just remember the actionable outcomes part. In the health sector during COVID, we saw every day, and they really harped on every morning, every afternoon, and every night, stats, dashboards around how many people had COVID, who was vaccinated, what locations were they from, which locations or geographic locations had a lesser rate of those being vaccinated, and what that actually meant for the community. They used a lot of predictive modelling to identify pressing issues that sectors like health and police, for example, needed to put resources. And I think we saw so much of that, which again changed a lot of the health sector and the way that we responded to potential incidences or risks that we needed to address. The other thing that I've noticed since the end of the pandemic is so many more people gravitated and do still continue to feel more comfortable with online shopping, online education, entertainment, gaming and shopping. Netflix went, I think, quadrupled over a month since everyone was locked down. So people are far more comfortable and confident with online and digital marketing type initiatives. So in the police context, data has always been important. And if you ask, well, what kind of data and why is it important? And if you think of frontline policing, for example, chatting to the community and getting the information and data from members of the community. You know, what have they heard? What movements have they seen? What movements have we seen that they're making? And also making sure that we deconflict and that we alert to other fellow districts when we are doing policing. So if something's going on Perth, is something potentially going to happen in the Mandurah district, for example? So the importance of alerting and deconfliction and using data to help us stay alert of what potentially could happen. The last few years has also seen, through a lot of major and high-profile cases, that manual effort that we've employed by sifting through and using bulk data. So a lot of the times for us, when we're trying to solve crime, it's essentially trying to find that little needle in the haystack of the data sets. And we want to move away, and I kid you not, we were using this a few years ago, using Excel documents and doing Control F. That is not the way to do business, especially not for policing. So we learnt and we've evolved from a few years ago through these major cases, and we can't use Control F. So we've recognised the importance of using the right data with the right tools to enable more efficient decision making and actionable intelligence, which leads to operational outcomes. So it needs to achieve a purpose and an outcome. The risk, if we don't change, in particular for policing, is that we will not be able to keep up with this generation of offending. Crooks are smarter, they're more tech savvy, they are more alert, and at times far more well equipped with policing methodologies, and you are dealing with a different generation of crime. And like I mentioned earlier, they have multiple watches, multiple gadgets, multiple tools that they use to circumvent policing capability. And it's a digital world that if we don't keep up with the new gadgets that they're using, we are always going to fall behind. So a little insight around how we solve crime. Don't tell anyone, even though I've posted it online and everyone's going to see it. This is how we solve crime and keep our community safe. So there's three very simple principles that we've employed and that we use throughout the agency for our detectives, frontline officers and tactical intelligence analysts. And it's our ILA principles, which is identify. So identifying your offenders responsible for committing crime that impacts our community, locating them and any persons at risk using data, tools and capabilities, and then associating it, which is the more complex part, but it's using data and capabilities to solve crime and associating really that end-to-end of offending. Data analytics really comes into play in that associate part. Because it's finding the intricacies or the commonalities between offending, or like I said, it's sometimes finding that little needle in the haystack that we're looking for to solve the crime. The beauty of the ILA principles, and I mentioned it earlier, it can be transferred to all crime types. So whether we're trying to solve a homicide, someone that's gone on a rampage with Bergs in a particular district, or trying to find a missing person. It's really the context, if I can say, that we use across our data sets. So let's talk a little bit about what we need to solve crime, and talk a little bit more about, well, what kind of data is it that you're looking for? So I try and break this up as simple as I can in categories. So I mentioned earlier about humans. Humans are an awesome source of information and data, whether it's from the community, whether it's from cops on the street talking to people calling 000 and reporting crimes. We've got human sources, victims, witnesses, and offenders. So anything essentially that you're getting from human interaction. Video, CCTV, dash cam, ANPR, so the number plate reader, recognition reader that we get, that we've got the best, let me say, in the state set up. Facial recognition, drones as well. Drones are playing a huge part in policing and a lot of other industries. One of my favourites, forensics. So think of a biometric footprint. So your fingerprints, your DNA, your voice recognition, iris recognition, any sort of identifying particulars. So your biometrics, and then your digital footprint type data. So we mentioned earlier telephone devices, like that's huge for us. CCTV, computers, looking at your browser histories or your emails or anything that's people think that they've deleted, but they've not really deleted. Social media, smartwatches. I can't tell you how much really awesome data comes from smartwatches. So the narrative on the right, where you see time, state, places, and etc., they are the identifiers that we need to help us solve crime or manage an incident or someone at risk. So think of all the data that I spoke about, and then think about those subcategories that are listed on the right. Think of it like a big puzzle that we've got to piece together with all of those data sets that I described, and it's using those parameters to put things together. And then think about those ILA principles I just spoke to you about that gives that operational context to the data. So this is where people like yourselves are critical to policing and helping us solve crime faster. The data needs to move through these various phases, which is really important to us. And this is stuff that you probably would be far better explaining to me rather than me explaining to yourselves. All the data sets that we've just described needs to move around these points on the right. So for police to use and respond to calls for help and emergencies in as rapid time as possible. So I'll quickly go through what's on the far right. Collection, data collection. We collect, we want more and more data, and there's going to be more and more data available as the years go on. But it's important that we collect it and that it's accurate and that it can be used for multiple purposes and applied in different applications and platforms. So we want to collect it once, we need to make sure it's accurate, and we want to make sure it's transferable into all the different applications that we use to help us solve crime. Storage. This is a huge issue not only across policing but across multiple industries, because we are collecting so much more data. So tell me please what the right solution is and what a right enterprise solution is. Is it on-prem? Is it a cloud? Is it a data lake? Is it a data stream? I don't know. We've got an amazing technology portfolio who have come up with some really awesome solutions for us. But to store and have that data accessible is so critical. The analytics, this is how we use the raw data to give us the answers that we essentially need. It's the associate part, like I said, of the ILA principles. And it's not just looking at data in isolation, it's trying to find the linkages between the data sets, which will essentially give you, like I said, that operational context it tells you the story that you need to know to understand how to solve the crime. And the visualization part, and I mentioned earlier about the dashboards that health used. Dashboards, charts, anything that's going to make it visually easier for you to help make an informed decision. The sharing, briefing, analysis and respond. This is really about sharing what we've discovered and making sure we can disseminate the right products to achieve a well-informed decision and a good actionable outcome. The only caveat I will say with what I've just said is, and when I spoke about informed decision, we can never, ever forget the importance of the human element when it comes to making decisions with data. I'm all for data. I love data analytics, love data specialists, love what it can produce, but it should never replace a human making a critical decision. And that is so important for policing, because if computer says, hey, I looked through the data and I think this is the offender, you need to corroborate that with the human making the right informed decisions. Just quickly about data overlay and the graph database that we use at WA Police. It's one of our greatest assets. It's like ILA on steroids is the best way I can describe it. It allows us to associate data across multiple large data sets. So it's like a federated search with the query tool that you can really use to interrogate a lot of your data sources. Humans, like I said, can do the identify location part quite well with the ILA principles. The associate part is complex, purely based on the sheer volume of data that you are now dealing with. And like I said, we try not sometimes look at data in isolation. They're not separate data points. It's not just a phone or a car or a person. It's what it means when these data sets are traversed and linked together to give you the context that you need. So, for example, let's say 3 potentially linked crimes in over 3 different dates, times, and locations. You might get an important ANPR hit on a car at one crime scene. At the other crime scene, you might get a phone, and you've got some metadata to say the handset was at this location at this time. And then at another scene, you might have a really good DNA hit. But when you put all those data sources together and you identify the links with the data, it could tell you a very different story. And this is how, at times, we can identify offenders who are, for example, on a Berg rampage. And there was a really successful case that we used these principles on when we first got this graph database, that when we solved it without the graph database, it took us weeks, but when we applied the data and used the graph analytics system, we got the answer so much quicker. So this is when I speak about the lessons learned from the previous cases that we experienced through the whole Control F type days. Now we've got really cool query tools that we can actually use to use the data more effectively. Where I'm not too sure if anyone's had, or if anyone online or here is from WA Police, we have the most amazing data science and analytics team. They do such phenomenal work. They're really now changing the culture of policing in WA and using and helping people understand the use of clever analytics and the power of data and the use of our graph analytics system called Iris, and we've now applied it in different multiple portfolios, which is really enhancing the way that they solve crime and make far more informed decisions. The powerful query tools that we can now use to query data, and they're also looking at further AI tools that we can consider moving forward. So it's really, really exciting for us, and I'd like to think that we are leading the way across all of the policing jurisdictions in the country. And finally, the future of solving crime for us, and this is where all of you online and in person fit in, and Minister Dawson spoke about it earlier. People like yourselves are the future of improving industry, and if I speak selfishly about policing, people like yourselves are going to help us solve crime faster for the community. We need the right platforms and the right analytics to help us use the data better and build far more efficient query tools and algorithms to assist solving crime. The culture that we've now developed at WA Police is we have our data science analytics specialists sitting with our detectives, sitting with our tactical intelligence analysts, because we need them to understand the operational context to build the right tools. Because gone are the days when you have IT projects that aren't talking to the business, and then the IT guy or girl says, hey, I built this for you, and you're like, no, I didn't want that. That doesn't help me at all. They need to be intertwined and working together to produce actionable intelligence and actionable outcomes for the community. So people like yourselves can build amazing products for us to help us solve crime faster for the community. I will again relay my comment about always having a human element to any of the data and the decisions that we make. But I do welcome anyone that does consider a policing career. We've got plenty of positions, really exciting opportunities. There is never a dull day in the office. Is it challenging? Yes. Is it hard work? Yes. But you will never find a more rewarding role to help the community and make sure that WA continues to stay safe. That's all from me. Thank you very much. I know it was a bit rushed, but happy to take any questions, and of course happy to speak to anyone offline as well. Yep.
So we definitely have time for some questions.
You want to use that one?
We definitely have time for some questions if my microphone works. So for those in the room, we'll start with Perth perhaps. Okay, that one's okay. So you hold that, and I'll take this over to Fiona.
Thanks so much for that really interesting talk. I think I read somewhere that the homicide rate has really plummeted in developed countries since the development of advanced biotech, you know, DNA techniques and that sort of thing, because the opportunity to get away with it has just vastly diminished. If that's true, I don't know if I've got my facts straight there. Do you think we could see something similar with the advent of the use of data science in, say, let's say financial crime or something like that? Or is it more a case that there's kind of like an endless race that's been initiated between financial criminals and the authorities in terms of we've both got the technology now?
Awesome question. I think there is some truth with homicides. I know here, I'm pretty sure for the last 6 years, there is no unsolved homicide, which is awesome for the state of WA. I wouldn't be committing any crimes anymore in the state of WA because we will find you. We have the best detectives, the best police officers, and phenomenal tactical intelligence analysts and data specialists because we're maturing the way that we use data. And there obviously is discussions, which I won't go into now, around the ethical use of data and respecting people's privacy, and I'm absolutely all for that and support that. But when it comes to community safety, as long as we can respectfully use the data and be open and transparent with how we use algorithms, for example, and because we are explainable to the court when we provide and submit a brief of evidence. So as long as we're transparent about that, I think we're good to go. In terms of financial crime, and I love money laundering. In my old career, I did a lot of money laundering jobs and they're so much fun. So many people think that they're boring. They're absolutely not boring because crooks commit crimes to make money. So you always got to follow the money to find the best crook. That's a different story, another presentation for another day. Money laundering has evolved. Money transactions, the way people move money, have evolved because now you're looking at things like digital currency and trade-based type money laundering, which is online. And you lose the ability to find that placement stage where someone's going to physically give someone cash and you're not going to have the ops on them, for example. So when we're looking at digital currency and the use of those sorts of methodologies to move money, it makes it a little bit more challenging for us because we have to get clever with tracking that in a digital context. It doesn't mean that we can't do it. We continue to find new ways to do it, and there's some really, really good groups that are formed together where the jurisdictions and a lot of the financial institutions work together to try and tackle issues like money laundering that we have. So, but I do think things like homicide, for example, people think twice. I would like to think anyway, and because they become good citizens. Let's hope for that.
Thank you. I'll ask a question online first, and then I'll revert back to in person. So, on the Slack channel, Matthew asked, before the data overlay visualization you showed, I presume like Iris, how did you visualize things? How similar was it to movies where there's a massive map on a whiteboard with pins and string and that sort of stuff?
It wasn't too. So back in the days when I was doing more operational work, it was manually doing I would draw the charts myself. And because I am a visual person, especially when you're doing things like an organised crime job where there's, you've got your money laundering syndicate, you've got your comms syndicate, you've got your transport syndicate, you've got the crooks on the ground, you've got so many different elements and aspects that you've got to look at. You've got to visualise it. So I guess we use Power BI quite a bit, which really informs and helps our frontline officers, for example, understand, well, what's the highest risk in the district? Who's the high harm offender that I need to be focusing efforts on? What's hurting our district over the last 7 days? So we use Power BI, but prior to that, it's literally having to go through things yourself, go through police databases and systems, read reports on a piece of paper. The power of visualization and overlay makes such a difference to making those really quick and rapid informed decision making, and in particular for policing. Sometimes you don't have the time to read through an 100-page report. You've got to make a decision there and then. And to help you make that best informed decision, you need good data and systems and visualization tools to give you the context that you need to make that right informed decision. So a lot of it was manual prior to that. I don't know if the CSI stuff with the clear windows and there probably is stuff like that. If anyone wants to help fund giving us that, I'll take the funding and we can develop that, can't we, Nick? Yep.
I think we had a question here in front.
Thanks, Arlene, for the talk. As a data scientist, I really appreciate that you mentioned the importance of the purpose and kind of the business side of data science. I think that's really important for the data scientist to be involved with the subject matter experts. With the evolving technology that you mentioned, how do frontline and I suppose the detectives get retrained and onboarded on all of these new ways of policing?
That's a really good question too. And the cultural change around how we have matured and how we should mature as operators using data and capability is an ongoing journey. So for recruits coming in, Nick, who's with me today, he's come out of a district and he trained a lot of the new recruits and the probies that came in. But the new generation of police officers that join are quite tech savvy. So it's they're used to it. I mean, my 7-year-old nephew knows how to use my phone better than I do. They've grown up with it. They're savvy with it. So they come into the job already with fine-tuned skills around how to use data and capability. But I've had some discussions with some different industries around how potentially we should evolve around baseline training for data and capability, because, and I'm kind of spewing that back in the days, I didn't pay more attention in my information technology course when they spoke about data and coding and Python theory. And I was like, I'm never going to use that. But now you've got to be so well equipped and in tune with what is out there. So should we look at baseline type courses for definitely entry level tactical intelligence analysts, for example, because using data and capability is bread and butter that they need to know every day. But for police officers and potentially senior police officers, I know there's some government agencies that are training them in a baseline course to understand, well, an algorithm consists of this is what a query looks like, this is how you can build queries. Because when you know what a data analyst or data scientist or data specialist can do for you, it's going to make your job so much easier. So back in my old job again, when the new data person came, I'd say, sit next to me, because I knew it was going to make my job so much easier. And when they would see how we would try and solve crime and use all the ILA principles, the more they know about the operational context, like I said, the more they're going to finesse a product that is fit for purpose, that is going to achieve the operational outcomes that you need. So I think we do need to mature more around baseline training for industry people who are not data specialists, to have them appreciate what's out there, but also understand that when something's built, they have a bit of an appreciation around how it was built, because then they can inform and provide the context and the insight to the data specialists far better to create a better product.
Okay, so something from Slack. This is more of a comment. It says, thank you so much, Arlene, for sharing such valuable insights into data analytics at Waypol. It's inspiring to see how data is being applied to real-world law enforcement to enhance operations and public safety. We appreciate your time and expertise, and I'm sure the audience has gained a lot from your presentation. I think I echo that as well.
Thank you.
So there is one question. Before that, I did work at Wavehole before returning to study, and I can say that the team there is really great, led by Janelle. And we might sometimes think, government jobs, government agencies, not so interesting. Nothing could be further from the truth. So that's my little testimony about working there.
When are you coming back?
I still got a little bit of my PhD to go. So a question from Daniel online. He says he's interested in the use of data from devices. And I don't know how much you can say about this, but how do you go about accessing data from locked devices, and why are smartwatches so useful?
Oh,
I don't know if
who
you
was
want to
that,
give
David?
this is Daniel.
Oh, Daniel, I have to see you in person. No. Look, I can't go too much into that. All I can say is think about what's in your devices and think about what would be of interest to us in the identify, locate, and associate part of what I described around putting the context into solving crime. You could Google it yourself. There are products out there that can assist with extraction of data. Encryption is a massive issue for us and a massive challenge for us. And when I spoke earlier about the changing criminal environment and how we have to keep up with the contemporary criminal environment, encryption is a huge challenge that we continue to face, because there are clever people out there that build these encrypted applications, which a lot of you probably use yourselves. There's some that would probably be a little bit more applied to a criminal group and their handsets that you could only potentially buy through that network. But if anyone can build something that's going to get through a thick layer of encryption, go right ahead, because you will be the best friends of every single law enforcement and intelligence agency in the world. But it's constantly changing, because as soon as you break through one, guess what? They're going to build another one.
I have a question here in Perth.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I guess I work in the health sector as a statistician, so it's kind of interesting and similar in the sense that, like, you're doing statistics and creating information for someone who's not trained in statistics and data science to interpret. And we always, as a statistician, my favorite thing to say is this may or may not be the case, because we understand that there's no matter how much data you have, there's always some degree of uncertainty, and oftentimes the data that you don't have is just as informative as the data that you do. Also a huge problem in clinical trials in the health sector. Missing data is really quite informative, and I guess I'm wondering not only how you can communicate something that, maybe rather than just having like a red number or a green number, how can you communicate the degree of uncertainty in that, and how do you deal with the data that you don't have as alongside the data that you do?
Again, great questions from everyone. When I spoke about the human element, that's really important, because data is great, but you have to cooperate. And I can in particular appreciate in the health sector that you would need to cooperate things, because you're dealing again with people's health, people's lives, or coming up with amazing treatments for, say, cancer or other illnesses. I thought I turned it off. No, it's still on. The importance of cooperating and validating data should always be an important factor to any sort of industry. So if I speak about the dashboards, and I spoke earlier about a dashboard, Power BI dashboard that we use, and one of it's like our most wanted offender. And underneath the dashboard, there's some clever analytics in there that we use that will determine who is a high harm offender, and they meet these categories. Some of the data will be missing because WA Police doesn't have access to that data, for example. So we can only go by what we have. In saying that, the importance of working with partners and looking at better ways through our partnerships that we can share and disseminate data. And this is something that we are working on with the likes of Department of Health and Department of Communities and Department of Justice, because having all the right data sets makes it so much easier. There's also got to be consideration around inconsistencies and potentially data that's not correct, because a lot of the times the data that we collect is from humans inputting things into a database, for example. So again, it comes back to, just because computer says this, it doesn't mean that it's right. The computer will help you do the bulk part of a lot of the data work that needs to be done. So we don't have to do it in Excel and do Control F. but you need to spend the time that you have gained through the computer doing the bulk work to validate it. Because generally, if something doesn't make sense, there's a reason why. And that is, and part of your question around educating the workforce, that is something that you've always got to educate the workforce on so people don't become lazy. And my mum always taught me that whilst you can put division on a calculator, don't forget how you did your long division, because the time will come one day when something happens and you've got to do your long division to know how you worked out to get the answer on the calculator. So that is always my advice as well with that.
Yes, back to the online question, and there's some related to the legal and ethical aspects, so you can sort of address these together perhaps. So Phoebe asked, do you think that any aspects of the law will need to be updated with the new advent of all this data and analytics to help solve crime?
Look, that's really dependent on what particular data sets that you're using. I think a lot of it, for the most part, legislation should allow for the use and dissemination of data, in particular when it relates to community safety. So I can't answer that because there's so many different data sets. There's so much legislation, for example, telecommunication data on the Telephone Interception Act 1979. 1979, that should give you a bit of a giveaway around how old it is and how things have evolved since then. So there's always going to be times that we have to look at legislative changes to enhance the way that we use data and share data. But there's always needs to be those considerations around, well, what would need a policy change versus a legislative change as well.
Yeah, so in that vein, so can you maybe cover some ethical considerations there are about using, say, time and location data? I mean, what is WA Police able to do?
So again, it depends on the data sets. We are strong advocates of ethical use of data and making sure that we do use data correctly. We've got a whole lot of auditing capability with our system. So if people are not using data correctly or unethically, our internal affairs unit will look at that and take appropriate action when required. But I know the government's very big on privacy of data and looking at using ethical committees, for example, to make sure that what we're doing is comfortable with the community. But we like to be very transparent with members of our community, so we can tell them we're looking at these kind of things, and these kind of things will require use of this particular data that will help us extract things like time, date and location to assist with solving crime fast or applying our identify, locate and associate principles. Ethical use of data will continue to evolve with more data that we collect, as well as the fact that we are becoming a far more data-rich world, as I described earlier, with the multiple extractions of data that we can get from all the different various devices that are now being used by everyday people. So it's going to continue to be an issue that we need to stay on top on and discuss.
Okay, so are there any questions from the other hubs in person that isn't already in Slack? I'll just let me check the other hubs to see. The problem is the camera's pointing where there's nobody there, so I can't see if there's any interest from the audiences there.
I thought I put the last slide on.
No? All right, I'll go back to someone in Perth here.
I'm based in Canberra, and I'm aware that AFP are also doing lots of data analytics and essentially maturing the way that they police. Similarly, with other federal government agencies like ASD, they do lots and lots of intelligence. And I suppose data science and statistics. How much knowledge sharing is there? So you mentioned WA is like maturing really well. Is there knowledge sharing with other states and territories, or learning, or I suppose if the jurisdiction shifts between WA and other states, how do you share that data? Is there legislation to share?
Yeah. So the relationships in particular in the data science and analytics space, I think they're quite good across the multiple jurisdictions. Those agencies that you described, I spoke to one of them just before I went on leave, who provided some awesome insight around what they're doing in the analytics space. Connecting the right people is so important. I can only speak to a certain level of data science and analytics because I'm not a practitioner. But when you find someone and you think, hey, they are super cool, they know their stuff and they're so passionate, you connect them with the Janelle Baileys of the world who heads our data science and analytics area, and let the smart people rule the world and develop amazing things for policing. There is a lot of capability. There's something called NCIS, National Criminal Intelligence System, that our partner jurisdictions are working on, and that's going to evoke a far more deconfliction type ethos around the jurisdictions to make sure that as policing in Australia, we work better together. We are huge advocates in WA of every victim deserves the same level of service. Whether you're in WA, whether you're in Victoria, whether you're in the ACT, every victim of crime always deserves the same level of service from policing. So we are very big on sharing capabilities that we've discovered. Iris, we've given demos to all of our partner jurisdictions, or most of the partner jurisdictions, because if it works for us in policing, it's probably going to work for policing in Victoria Police, for example, and vice versa. We've had multiple discussions and demonstrations from other partner jurisdictions around, hey, we've developed this really cool algorithm. You should try it and see if it works for you. And I think moving forward, if we're on similar platforms that are agnostic, we can share, say, really good algorithms or query builders where it's like you just got to do the drop down and at the time, date and location, and let the computer or the analytics do its thing. So sharing deconfliction and working with partner agencies is absolute key to success, and we strongly advocate for it.
Okay, so I think we might draw to close. I just may have one last question to finish off the session. So this is the Early Career and Student Statisticians Conference. So where might we go about finding more about how we can be part of, or what WA Police is doing and being part of this data revolution that's going on?
Yeah, look, always keep, if WA Police is an interest for you all, and I would hope and we would welcome people like yourselves to join WA Police. Happy, just keep looking at our current vacancies on our website, but I'm always happy to connect people to the right persons within our data science and analytics team. We've got a whole lot of programs, as you probably know, that we use to get students in and to work on particular projects as well. But please just reach out. You've got my details. I'm happy to connect people to the right people within WA Police. But like I said, it's never a dull day in the office.